Yes, Monday morning in Washington. And crazy is off the chain again and on the loose. I'm back in the saddle after a week in the United States of America. Anyone else spend any time in the United States of America lately? Very nice. I joined family and friends in beautiful downtown South Haven, Michigan, along the beautiful sandy shores of Lake Michigan, one of our great lakes. Boy, let me tell you something. These lakes are great, too. Had a wonderful time. Got a whole lot of stories to tell. I'm in the market for a new wedding ring. What? My wedding ring came off in Lake Michigan while throwing a Frisbee back and forth with my brother, one of my Chicago brothers. But it was beautiful. It was, I think it was 82 degrees and sunny and no humidity all day and all night long. That's right. The sun was up all night long. It was beautiful and wonderful stuff. And I'm going to talk about beautiful Michigan and the great American Midwest and the United States of America and Americans a little bit later on in the show. Because my vacation was great. It was something to write home about. It was wonderful. And it turns out that Americans are still good and decent people. It's just Washingtonians and New Yorkers that are massive rectal apertures every time you look up. And not nice people. These are people who are not famous for being nice people in Washington, D.C. and New York. And then there's California. You know, what it is the left. And a big question while we were in Michigan, and since we got back with my neighbors and so on, and that is whether people in the Midwest have gotten nicer or whether people on the East Coast have gotten meaner. And there is almost universal agreement as to what's going on there. So I want to get into that a little bit later on. But first, gosh, gone for a week and a whole lot has happened since I went away a week ago last Friday to the heartland. And a lot of it has to do with Joe Biden and his corrupt Biden organized crime syndicate family, and more has been learned, and there's a lot to talk about. John Solomon, Just the News, great reporter, investigative journalist, Washington, D.C. Amazing stories about the Joe Biden had a secret phone when he was vice president, and it was paid for by one of their shell companies, this Rosemont Seneca firm that paid for then Vice President Joe Biden's cellular telephone. And that's the one that Hunter was calling him on from business meetings in Dubai with Ukrainians and so on. And when he's meeting with Chinese, hey, I'll call my dad on the secret phone. That's not. And also, I've heard a lot of people talk about this over the weekend, Joe Biden's secret telephone, his secret cell phone, on which he would take calls from Hunter Biden no matter what, day or night, because he always, had it at his bedside table and in his pocket. And anytime crackhead called, he had to take the call because it's about the family business, which is selling influence in the United States of America for millions and millions of dollars to overseas oligarchs and, Chinese communists. But pay no attention to that. John Solomon, you may have seen this story. He actually got the phone number and for Joe Biden's secret cell phone, and he called it, and Joe Biden answered. Now, do you remember something that occurred to me yesterday when I was listening to people talking about this on the Sunday talk shows and so on, which I have to watch, otherwise nobody would. Honestly, most of the time I can miss them too because they're not what they used to be by a long shot. But Joe Biden and the cell phone, you remember when Barack Obama became president, and he insisted, first time for anyone, he insisted that he have a cell phone and be able to carry a cell phone with him because he was Thoroughly Modern Millie before Thoroughly Modern Millie was Thoroughly Modern Millie at the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And it was a big deal. It was a news story for months because they so adore Barack Obama in a sexual way. The news media does. They so adore him. They so worship him. They long to brush up against the hem of his garment. And then they'll never bathe again. They're like teenagers touching Elvis Presley. And they made a big deal about Barack Obama's cell phone and how it had to go to the CIA, where you may remember he appointed that communist voter, John Brennan, penitentiary-faced Brennan, to be the CIA director. And it had to go to the NSA, and it had to go to the Secret Service to make sure that his cell phone was highly secure, secured cell phone of the President of the United States. Well, Joe Biden had a burner phone that his crackhead son got him in between stops with Russian hookers, but pay no attention to that. So we got that going for us. And John Solomon, he got the number. The number was provided in documents on Capitol Hill. Hey, let's call this Joe Biden's secret cell phone number and see what happens. And Joe Biden picks up because he thinks it's Hunter in the middle of a crack deal with Chinese communists or something like that. Pretty amazing stuff. And then, of course, the Jim Jordan letter, the Congressman Jim Jordan, the bombshell letter from Biden to Devon Archer proves that everything Joe Biden's been telling us about their business dealings, big lie. Devon Archer, of course, testified last week, not in open session, pathetically, but behind closed doors, to Congress last week while I was in Michigan, and all kinds of amazing stuff was learned, all kinds of amazing things, and there was some truth got out, and the left hates that. Boy, do they hate that. They really despise the truth. They're anti-truth. They're the left, and that means the Democrat Party in the United States of America. But I've got a lot for you on the Devon Archer testimony and what was learned. Much of what was learned, a great deal was learned. I will share what I can with you today. And Jim Jordan with this letter from Joe Biden, Dear Devon, it begins, like they're dating, or he wants to date, and Dear Devon. And he goes on about the business connections, and Jim Jordan points out what is obvious when you see the letter, and that is that everything that Joe Biden has been saying about not talking to his son about the businesses and all of that is just a big lie, a huge, gigantic, fatuous lie that has been exposed. Not that the Washington Post cares. However, the Washington Post did hit Biden with 4 Pinocchios. And in fact, they've hit him with 4 Pinocchios a couple of times lately because it becomes too embarrassing to carry this bucket of swill for Lunch Bucket Joe Biden, knowing that it's so flagrantly false and has been debunked and disproven. And the Washington Post and the New York Times, they'll carry the water for as long as they can until it becomes, this is one of my rules, until it becomes so humiliating that it's embarrassing for them to continue to parrot this obviously false line about, the Hunter Biden laptop is not really Hunter Biden's laptop. They tried that for a couple of years, I think, at the Washington Post because they lie with great ease and alacrity. But they had to give Lunch Bucket Joe 4 Pinocchios a couple of times lately, 4 Pinocchios for falsely claiming Hunter never made money from China. Then Hunter said, oh, yeah, we made millions from China and millions from the Russian widow of the late and former mayor of Moscow with his Putin connections. And so never mind that. And then a bottomless Pinocchio. I pulled up the old bottomless Pinocchio from Joe Biden, too, and we got that going. So Joe Biden is a big fat liar, and he's brain damaged, and that's going to be the excuse they fall back on, is that his brain doesn't work as designed, so it's not his fault. We just elected a moron, and that's going to be part of the thing. And also, we got the Secretary of the Department of Energy under Joe Biden. Turns out she has had a lot of communication with the Chinese energy chief there. And then, we're turning over fuel from our strategic petroleum reserve to the communist Chinese. And Joe Biden's, energy secretary is on the horn with the Chinese communist energy chief. And they're cutting deals. They're talking. They're making stuff happen. Pretty amazing stuff. So we got that going for us. And there's a lot more because there is a Democrat judge, and she's a Democrat first and a judge second. Tanya Chutkan. Tanya Chutkan has now put President Trump and his attorneys in something of a squeeze play, a vice. And the Democrats are coming after free speech again because they call themselves Democrats, but they're really not. They're leftists. They're not liberals. They're leftists. And they don't believe in the First Amendment. And they don't believe in free speech. And, the great old American axiom, I may disagree with what you have to say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it, is not something that the Democrat Party subscribes to anymore. They used to not so long ago, really just before Obama came along. The Democratic Party was much more democratic than it is now. But keep in mind, the Democratic Party isn't. Friendly fire isn't. Common courtesy isn't. But the Democrat Party certainly is not democratic at this point in American history. Tanya Chutkan, and I read story after story. This is the judge that is, the Democrats have gone to this Obama-appointed judge. And I'm going to keep saying that because nobody in the news media is pointing out that I point this out all the time because it's true. And that's what I do. I point out stuff that's true. And then, the Democrats lie about it. And that means the news media too. But this Tanya Chutkan woman is the judge in the midst of the latest effort by the so-called Democrat Party to crush the free speech of Donald John Trump, the former president of the United States, possible future president of the United States, running against Joe Biden. And President Trump has been very vocal in the last several days in particular that the Biden administration is using the Justice Department to come after him, to target him as the number one political rival to the current president of the United States, which brings to mind the fact that Vlad the Impaler Putin in communist Russia just had one of his adversaries thrown in jail for 19 years. One of Vlad the Impaler Putin's, a critic of Putin named Navalny, was thrown in prison for 19 years because that's what communists do. And Navalny now in the slammer, and they're not gonna let him go. He'll probably die in there, maybe sooner rather than later. It's kind of like may turn out to be a Jeffrey Epstein style story. These are the kinds of things that we used to be able to laugh at in the United States of America and, say, I'm proud to be an American, or at least I know I'm free. And we would see things like the Kremlin critic Navalny convicted of extremism, same word that the Democrats are using to describe everybody that's not a leftist looter who burns police cars. Those are the extremists, the people that don't burn police cars. Amazing stuff. So the Putin critic, Kremlin critic Navalny, convicted of extremism, kind of a vague charge, and sentenced to 19 years. And the Republicans, some Republicans, and President Trump are raising eyebrows and saying, what kind of a country are we? I'm thinking of starting a new segment on the big radio broadcast that will be something like, you're a redneck if. That's the what's his name? Jeff Foxworthy does the you might be a redneck or you're a redneck if. I might start a segment called "You Might Be a Third World Country If." You might be a third world country if, and you might be a third world country if the president of the United States uses his Justice Department to imprison, or at least to try to imprison, his number one political rival. And President Trump, of course, because President Trump is now facing how many? 78 different charges in 3 different cases brought by Democrats in D.C. and Florida and New York. And if convicted of all of these crimes, he could be sentenced to 641 years in prison, making Putin and the Kremlin look moderate by comparison. And we still haven't gotten to the radical left-wing extremist prosecutor in Atlanta, Georgia, who's planning on bringing more charges against President Trump, because you might be a third world country if you really might be. But this judge, Tanya Chutkan, I read article after article after article, and none of the articles mention that the woman in the middle of this really heated political case is an Obama-Biden appointee. She was appointed by the Obama-Biden administration, and she's being called upon to recuse herself, but she's a leftist, so she won't. And I looked her up yesterday, did a little bit of research. Turns out that Tanya Chutkan's grandfather was the founder of the lead socialist party in Jamaica. Her grandfather, leader of the Socialist Party in Jamaica. You got to keep in mind that Obama chose the Communist Party voter penitentiary faced Brennan to be the CIA director, and then we saw the CIA being abused and corrupted all over the place by the commie voter. He voted for Gus Hall, the perennial Communist Party candidate for president. And, of course, they brought in Van Jones to the White House, very proudly announcing he was a self-described communist at the time, too. And now the judge in whose hands this matter lies until 5 p.m. today, the granddaughter of the founder of the Socialist Party, the lead Socialist Party in Jamaica. And she's not going to recuse herself. Jack Smith keeps showing up when the Democrats find themselves in trouble, the special counsel. I've got an update for you on that. And crime in Washington, D.C. going crazy because, you know why, Jeff? Democrats. We're at 888-630-9625.
You're listening to The Chris Plante Show.
Hey, Chris here with some exciting news. Now you can listen to me live on the WMAL app. Doesn't matter if you're in your car, in the office, on the go. The WMAL app delivers crystal clear around-the-clock news coverage anywhere with cell service or Wi-Fi. So don't miss a second of your favorite shows. Download the WMAL app today on the Apple App Store or at Google Play Store. So, we've got, it's like Mel Brooks in History of the World, Part 1, talking about corruption. Corruption goes all the way to the palace. Boy, when you die at the palace, you really die at the palace. But it's not limited to the palace. That'd be the White House, of course. And in Washington, D.C., we got a lot of crazy going on and across the country as well. But in Washington, D.C., I noticed this when I was on vacation, the Mexican Embassy, that is the embassy of the nation of Mexico in Washington, D.C., the consulate here has warned Mexican citizens about crime in D.C. They put out an official warning. We do this sometimes. Don't go to Sarajevo when, the Serbs have snipers in the hills. Don't go to Rwanda when the Hutus are slaughtering the Tutsis. And now the Mexican consulate warns citizens in D.C. about crime here, and with good reason. A couple of the headlines that I found this morning: 3 killed, 4 hospitalized in shooting in Anacostia. 3 killed in D.C. shootings that police call, quote, senseless act of violence, end quote. Do you really have to say that it's a senseless act of violence when 3 people are murdered? Really? You think maybe it made sense? Is that a possibility here? Also, surge of homicides in D.C. leaves 13 dead in the first 5 days of August. Honestly, it's a war zone. You know why? Because Democrats have waged war on the police, and they're pro-crime. The Democrat Party is actually the pro-crime party, and they're therefore pro-criminal as well. I've got an update for you on some of this, and what one of our brilliant city council members had to say about this. He's got a plan.
This is the Chris Plante Show.
Also got naturally transgender news for you today. I don't say trans because trans is a prefix that can be applied in a great many circumstances. By the way, August is Pride Month. What? It's American Pride Month. I'm just going to call it Pride Month, though, because it's American Pride Month. August is American Pride Month. You can be proud to be an American all August long because, and you see the story out of Great Britain, the transgender person who's suing for his testicles. He's got to go to court, try to get his testicles back because his boyfriend has his testicles. I'm not making this up. This is what the Democrat Party has done. This is It's what the left has done. And we had that soccer game yesterday, too, with, I feel bad for the women on the soccer team that are normal and respectful and behave as adults behave. And then this Megan Rapinoe person who just blew it yesterday for the American team. She thinks that men should be playing. Because remember there was this episode where the women's team, our national team, played a bunch of 15-year-old boys, and the boys just whooped them. So we got updates on some of that stuff, too. Yes, sir. And the Democrats have another man playing tennis as a woman, and again mopped the floor with all the women and went home with the trophy. And the Democrats applaud that. And Megan Rapinoe says that men should play against women in soccer, forgetting the fact that they were beat by a bunch of 15-year-old boys. What are you, like a freshman in high school when you're 15, maybe a sophomore in high school when you're 15 years old? Beat the greatest team women's team that America could field. Pretty amazing stuff. But let's get back to the crime and mayhem in Washington, D.C., because the Democrats did this. Democrats love crime and Democrats love criminals. There is no other possible explanation for their behavior and their policies, right? But here's a Newsweek magazine story from April. Crime is making Americans flee Democratic states. What is this? I was doing research yesterday and I found this article from April Newsweek, so-called magazine. James Bickerton typed the story. Crime is making Americans flee Democratic states. And the population of traditionally Republican states have grown, right? And while several Democrat states have seen declines in population, U.S. Census Bureau data shows. Surprise, surprise. You guys weren't aware of this, huh? You got to go find a government agency to tell them it's true. Many of those leaving cited law and order, politics, the cost of living, taxes and everything else as factors. By the way, gasoline prices are up another, what is it? Is it 30 cents in the last month? Gas prices up again. I'll get to that. I've got that story with me today as well. Because Joe Biden's energy policies are third world. You might be a third world country if. California especially suffering the highest taxes, crime, and homelessness. What, you don't want to live in a crime-ridden, homeless, it's an open-air mental asylum. It's a turn of phrase that I've been using because it's accurate. Open-air mental asylums like San Francisco and New York City and Washington, D.C., for that matter. And then the murders happen at a war zone rate. And you know what they decided to do? Well, wait till you hear what Trayvon Martin has proposed here in Washington, D.C. A member of the city council, not the brightest bulb, I'm telling you. So some experts, they always talk to experts, told Newsweek magazine it's part of a longer-term trend. The influx of people from blue states is turning some traditionally Republican states purple because they want more murder and more carjackings and more crime and stuff. And again, I woke up this morning and I was being bombarded. And believe it or not, on the front page of the Washington Post, they actually have this story. D.C. toll above the fold, they love their colons, 13 slain in first 5 days of August in Washington, D.C. We're a city of 650,000 people, not the biggest city in the country by a long, long shot. But residents look to police and city officials, but shootings unchecked. So a surge of shootings in D.C. that left 13 people dead in the first 5 days of August has rattled neighborhoods from Adams Morgan to Anacostia, with each new victim a grim reminder of the city's failure to contain violent crime. Nothing officials try seems to have had much effect. Well, that's because they defund the police. They demonize the police. I told you a story that on Memorial Day I was hanging out with a number of police officers, current and former police officers in Washington, D.C. at D.C. Metropolitan Police. And I was told, and my best girl and I were told down on the mall hanging out with people, that, your D.C. police, you get a call to go to, you would take your time. And when you get there, you don't want to be aggressive in policing because the Democrat Party will lynch you from a tree. And so there are no high-speed chases to get the bad guys, which they've banned. You won't chase people through the city if they're on motorcycles or something and they just shot somebody or robbed someplace, because the cops are the bad guys thanks to the Democrats. And then, very predictably, I'm not Nostradamus, but I predicted long ago, this will obviously lead to a spike in homicides, and who will mostly be murdered? Young black men. And sure enough, though I'm not Nostradamus, everything that I predicted long ago has certainly come to pass. And what are the Democrats doing about it? Well, they're, it seems, mostly brain damaged, so they're not doing anything intelligent about it. They're blaming the police, they're attacking the police, they're doing. Now, that's the front page of the Washington Post. So 13 murders first 5 days of August. It's pretty amazing stuff. Also, the front page of the Washington Times today. They've got carjacking in D.C. just a game to juveniles without fear of judicial consequence. That's because they're pro-crime. The Democrats run the city, and that means they're running it into the side of a mountain because that's what they do. They're not on our side. For how long have I been saying that, Jeff? Jeff Wolf is in today for Michael Piercy, who's also on vacation. He's at the beach with his loving family. Oh, he sent some funny stuff along, too, that I'm going to try to share with you. So they've got, 3 killed, 2 wounded. We've got an increase of homicide rates about 22% so far this year versus this date last year. And carjackings are off the charts, and they're juveniles. And they're like, well, you're a kid. They're not going to put you in jail. They're not really going to do anything. So, shoot them, kill them, drag them to death, which the teenagers have done. 2 teenage girls dragged that immigrant man to death. He was an Uber driver, and they murdered him. And this is our nation's capital in the United States of America. Now, with the homicides and the record stuff, just crazy stuff, what do the Democrats have in mind? Well, let's go to probably, I think, my favorite Washington, D.C. city council member because, he's so good. He's great. His name is Trayon White. You may remember Trayon White. We have some Trayon White audio. Trayon White is a Democrat, a virulent anti-Semite, which is very, very common for Democrats today. They are the party of anti-Semites, and they say they're anti-Zionist, which means they want to eliminate the state of Israel, the safe haven for the Jewish people. But guess who's coming for them? The Democrat Party and the left in the United States of America. If you're Jewish and you vote Democrat, you're out of your mind. Let me just say, maybe you're anti-Zionist too. Me, I'm a Zionist. I believe in the legitimacy of the state of Israel and the need for the state of Israel, and I will fight to protect the state of Israel. But that's me. The Democrats, not so much, including so many members of the squad. But the Democrats, they love crime, they love criminals, they despise the police. They have neutered the police. They have defunded the police in Washington and elsewhere. And we have seen homicide and other crime rates skyrocket in the places where they have defunded the police and demonized the police. And again, talk to any police officer. Are you policing as aggressively as you were a few years ago? No, I'm not, they'll tell you. Why? Well, because they know that they're living on borrowed time and that the Democrats in charge of these cities will lynch them with a rope and a tree as soon as the opportunity presents itself. Now, Trayon White, you may remember Trayon White. He made a video of himself driving in Washington, D.C., and it was winter time, and it started to snow, which happens here in the Mid-Atlantic region. And Trayon White made a video of himself proving what a moron he is, and then posted the video proving what an idiot he is, because he had to do both. And here's Trayon White on the Jews and the Rothschild family, European banking family, being responsible for the weather and for the snow in Washington, D.C., and there's a big diabolical plan behind it.
Man, it just started snowing out of nowhere this morning, man.
It's winter.
Y'all better pay attention to this climate control, man. Climate manipulation. And DC keep talking about we're a resilient city. And that's a model based off the Rothschilds controlling the climate to create natural disasters. They can pay for it and own the cities, man. Be careful.
Be careful. Definitely be careful. Take his advice. Be careful. But you should be careful when it comes to Democrats roaming the city shooting people. Stop shooting people, Democrats. Please, I implore you, stop shooting people. So the surge of shootings in Washington, D.C. that left 13 people dead in the first 5 days of August rattled neighborhoods from Adams Morgan to Anacostia. Each new victim a grim reminder of the city's failure to contain violent crime. But the that July began with 10 killings in the first 5 days, 10 murders in the first 5 days. That was July. And now August begins with 13 people killed and compared to 10 people killed in the first 5 days of last month. Now, the Washington Post naturally went to the anti-Semite mental midget Trayon White to ask him, hey, everybody's getting murdered and a whole lot of them are in your district in Ward 8. What do you think we should do about it? And here's what Trayon White said after defunding the police, demonizing the police, vilifying the police, blaming the police. Here's what Trayon White says. We need the National Guard in D.C. We need the National... So wait a minute. You defund the police. You render the police ineffective. And then you call for a military occupation of the capital of the United States because what you did led to the predictable outcome, which anybody with two brain cells to rub together could have told you well in advance of your idiotic, and Muriel Bowser, another idiot, and hey, let's defund the police and see what happens. All right, I hope you attend all the funerals because you've got blood on your hands. And let me say this. If you're a Democrat and you vote Democrat, you've got blood on your hands. You're voting for this. You're voting for more murder. You're voting for more carjackings. You're voting for more criminals on the street. You're voting for more people to be beaten over the head and robbed. And you're voting for more carjackings and more sexual assaults and for more everything terrible. So we need the National Guard in D.C., says Trayon White. He says the crime is out of control and getting worse by the day, Trayon White. Are the Rothschilds responsible, Trayon? Because it could be part of their sinister, diabolical Jewish plot to lead to murders in Washington, D.C. He then said, kids and innocent people are getting killed. See, he gets the papers. It's becoming status quo with no end in sight. Recently learned the term status quo. D.C. has recorded at least 158 homicides this year. You know, our last year in Afghanistan under President Trump, I think we had 3 or 4 killed in action in Afghanistan, an occupying military force. At D.C. is 61 square miles, if you don't count the rivers, the watery parts. D.C. has recorded at least 158 homicides this year. Let's go look at the composition of this population of 158 homicide victims. According to a police spokesman, an increase of about 22% over this time in 2022. That's last year. That puts the city on a trajectory for its deadliest year in 2 decades, the Washington Post says. Homicides have actually dropped in other major cities, including Bodymore, Murderland, Shirakistan, Chicago, New York City, and Philadelphia, where homicide rates have dropped. But boy, in D.C. And then what does Trayon White want to do? A Democrat city council, anti-Semite. We need the National Guard in D.C. because that's the solution, a military occupying force in the capital of the United States of America, because the Democrat Party, when they fail, they come up with another tragically flawed idea to fix their own failures. And then the United States, honestly, you might be a third world country if your capital is occupied by the military and military vehicles with military rifles and military uniforms and helmets because, Trayon, the problem is not our guns, it's your sons. The problem is not our guns, it's your sons. It's not the Second Amendment, it's the left. And they're accelerating the pace at which America is becoming a third world country. The Mexican consulate has warned its citizens about how dangerous it is to be in Washington, D.C. This is because of the Democratic Party, so-called.
There's only one Chris Plante. The Chris Plante Show.
All right, so much crazy to get to, and only 2 more hours to go. A lot has happened since I left, and a lot happened over the weekend. With that, Jeff, let's go to the telephones. Let's go to Tony calling from Tampa, Florida. Tony, you're on the Chris Plante Show.
Thank you, Chris. I just want to say something about that women's soccer team. I'm glad they lost, and I'll tell you why. Because the women's soccer player, Rapinoe, she takes a knee during the national anthem. That's like giving the middle finger to the United States military, the flag, and the national anthem. And if it wasn't for the United States military, the flag, and the national anthem, 90% of the world would be enslaved by Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. You ought to dig yourself, Rapinoe. Don't be a backstabbing stool pigeon. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, honestly, you're right. Of course, this Megan Rapinoe person who, has a purple hair, thinks that men should be playing in the women's soccer league, which I think would be fun. I think it'd be funny, sort of, given that a bunch of high school boys beat the women's national team like they had one leg, and it was an embarrassment for all of them. Megan Rapinoe is an appalling joke. Also, there was a photo making the rounds yesterday. It was Sweden, the women of Sweden that beat the United States yesterday. I think the game was at 5 a.m. Eastern time or something, playing in New Zealand. And our team, our women, and I know that some of the young women on the American team are perfectly normal, wholesome, healthy players. But the organization has to flush and start over again, because these political extremists, these radicals, and then Megan Rapinoe missed, a penalty kick, and she missed the net by a mile, and then she did an interview afterward, Megan Rapinoe. She doesn't have a lot of fans, at least among normal people. Remember normal. And she did an interview afterward, asked what her proudest moment was playing for the U.S. women's national team. She said it was getting more money for the players, even though their games don't make that much money. It's a socialist construct that she successfully advocated for. And they don't earn the money, but they get it from somebody else. A lot of people are not unhappy that the American women lost.